All right, I'd like to do a quick introduction, I guess. This is an older, it's a Craftsman made by Atlas actually. And it's, I got the model written here. It's a 101.07383 model. This thing was made, I can tell you right now, it's pre-1940 because in 1940, Atlas and Craftsman used Timken roller bearings, so 1939 was the last year for Babbitt style bearings. Pull this cover up here. And it has the one piece apron. From what I read, 1936 and 37, I believe, had the one piece apron. I think I read in 38 that the two piece apron came out. So I'm saying it's a 36, 37, 38, 39, something like that. So it's a 12 by 36, meaning you got 12-inch swing over the bed. You got 6 inches from the center, a little over 6 inches. And with the factory chuck, which my brother has right now, this is an upgraded one. I think actually from the headstock with the chuck off, you have 36 inches from center to center of the headstock. So the lathe works. I bought it a little rough condition. Everything needed adjustment, wear out, and every screw you can imagine was loose. The motor was underpowered. So here's what I did: was I bought a single phase 1 horsepower reversible electric motor. I bought a CME. Let's see, CME K11-160A 3-jaw chuck. I think it's a CME. Yeah, CME. I bought an AXA, just a 250-111 quick change tool post, and I had to modify the factory block that comes with this tool post. So I didn't modify anything on the lathe. I modified the factory installed block, and to me, a quick change tool post is a must for this thing. But we'll get into that. So I adjusted all the slack I could. The nut was worn out, so I was able to crimp it and get it tight there. I got minimal slack here, which is acceptable. All the bedways are smooth. They do have minimal wear here. I mean, you can barely even feel it. You can see it, but barely feel it. So I'm running through the lathe, how it works. Obviously, you got the belt drives. So as belt tighten, pull it forward, loosen the belt, and you change the belt to the appropriate speed. I got it on the slowest speed here, and I got it on the faster speed here because the double pulley was a 1/2-inch shaft. This is a 5/8, so I'd have to machine the shaft to fit in order to use the same belt for both pulleys. Right now, I'd rather just buy a second belt, swap a belt over, slide a pulley. Not a showstopper for me. So I don't have the quick change gear set, but all the gears, for being it's a Zamek, they're in really good condition. Minimal slack, in my opinion. I mean, I can just slack, but I'm saying the minimal teeth wear for a 1930s. I was impressed. And this is the reversing gear to reverse the direction of travel of the compound of the auto feed. Right. Got the original Craftsman gear chart. That's pretty cool. Originally, this lathe came with the Craftsman 4-jaw chuck, which has been raining a lot. I just moved the lathe inside. I just had it outside, kept it covered, kept it oiled throughout the years, whatever. But I need to clean this, but it works, performs well. So a typical, no electrical control boards to go out. It's just on and off. So I got the belt loose, so it's, but so on and off. Babbitt bearings, I have to oil every use, put some drops of oil. I did do a run out with the dial indicator when I first got this thing, and I thought the Babbitt bearings were going to be toast. The run out was high, like 7-8 thousandths. So what happened was everyone who's used this thing since the 30s, whatever, never undoing the caps to adjust the bearing. They have some shim plates in there that's like, it's like stickers. You peel off a layer to drop the bearing clearance. So I got the bearing clearance down to 1.5 thousandths, and which is perfectly acceptable for a 1936 machine. So anyway, I'll turn this thing on and we'll look in here, and that's actually quiet for this thing, but all the auto feed is turning. So you see the Acme shaft is rotating. We're going to engage, and it's going to start moving on its own. So if you want to thread, you actually have to buy the matching gear sets that match the coordinating numbers to get the feed rate you want to thread. But I don't really do a bunch of threading, so it wasn't a big deal. And I think one of my favorite things is this: when I want to reverse the feed rate, the feed direction, I just change the gearbox, roll it, line it up. So that's reverse. That reverses the direction of the shaft. And now when I engage it, she's going to auto feed the opposite direction. So it's a pretty cool setup. I like that for 80 something years old. I mean, it's excellent, man. It's excellent. So another feature I like is in fact, let me pause the video. I'll pull this cover off. I need one hand to hold my camera here, so I'll show you how to use what's called the back gear and how to disengage everything. So let me pause it real quick. So back at it, you see how all this works? Everything is moving except for that middle set of gears, and I'll show you what that's for. So there's a pin in this drive, and it's right there actually. You pull the pin outwards. Give me a second. So what that pin does is locks this drive gear to the driven pulleys. Let me pause it, pull the pin, and show you. So now the pin is out, so the chuck is no longer locked to the pulleys. So the pulleys don't matter. Right now, if I turn it on, it's going to do nothing. Like, it's just going to spin on the bearings. So, but for quietness, let me disengage the transmission. So we engage the back gear. It's a eccentric shaft, like a cam. So that's engaged. Once the back gear is engaged, it gives you your lower RPM. And if I engage the transmission, it still auto feeds, but really slow. So it's, you know, certain things you're going to need the slow RPM for turning. I'm an amateur machinist. So I have lathes for hobby use, making minor gun parts, telescope parts, go-kart parts, you know, stuff like that. So push the pin in. I won't be able to do it, but push the pin in and rotate the gear. Boom, and the pin locks back in. Disengage the back gear. Very important. Don't try to run them both. You're gonna, if you're lucky, you'll slip the belt. Anyways, I'll run it with the guard off because I know I'm not gonna put my fingers in there. To change the belt, the ratio, you just pop the belt off, drop it down. That's simple. Now you're going faster. So these have the little oilers too. There's what's called a wick in there. It's I'm not sure what kind of fabric it is or cloth, but it helps slowly drip the oil in there so you're not just pouring oil and running through the bearings. Engage the transmission. So I'll try to do this with one hand here. Here's my operation. It's a little tighter than I like, but it's okay. So here's what I do personally. This, if I'm manual feeding, it's easy to move, right? So this is what I do personally. I like the feature on this lathe. There's this little screw here. It's a lock. It locks the apron. This is the apron to the bedway. Now that's locked. I can't move that. It's not going to move. It makes it more rigid. And now I use my taper attachment, which it's at 90 degrees, so I go in and out with my taper. And that gives me a way smoother cut, but without that, for facing off aluminum for sure, it's easy. So I'm gonna go in with my taper and in with the compound. And not on this particular lathe. You can upgrade the apron, but there is also an auto feed gear drive to feed this way as well. I don't plan on doing that option. So let me pause the video. I'll get set up. Actually, I'm not gonna pause it. We're gonna roll like this. I'll do everything on one hand. So if I want to change my angle of my cutter, unloosening the quick change only releases the tool from the post. So what we want to do, let's roll back a little bit, is tighten it back up, loosen this nut. And I know this one's tight, I put it tight. So loosen that nut. I can slide wherever I want as long as I'm in that T groove. And we don't have to square it up. I'm not getting that technical with it, but if I'm seeing something nice here, I'm gonna square everything up, line everything up. So with the quick change, as I adjust this nut, it raises and lowers the height of this tool. So the quick change really it's light years ahead of the old lantern style tool post, which I still have for the originality, but it didn't perform too well for me. So that's locked down. I'm gonna come this way. I'm gonna run it back out, and we're gonna cut with the auto feed transmissions and forward. So let's auto feed this bad boy in. So I leave the carriage, the apron loose. I can tighten it slightly, but it doesn't matter. We're gonna move into our piece. You see, I'm touching. Not yet. So now I'm just going to engage the auto feed. Now you have to pay attention. You don't want your tool to run into the chuck. So, and it's a 3-jaw chuck, so my piece didn't center up perfectly. That's fine. I've got to get a deep cut right here. So I make a habit. You're supposed to watch your dial where your number's at. Go back a little bit. There's slack and all that. I gotta adjust it. Roll back the machine and go back to the number I was at, which I think it was 20 or 19, but I didn't pay attention. So let's see. Yeah. So let's take another 2 thousandths. And take a deep cut. And by the way, this is the old broken Maglite flashlight part. You have to disengage that bad boy. You got to be quick with it. So, and when you're threading, you loosen this bolt, engage this wheel to this shaft, and when you want to thread, you line up to the appropriate number. Which I don't know how to thread. Well, I've never tried. Let's put it like that. I watched a bunch of videos, but never tried. And when your number lines up to your dot, you engage every time on the same spot, and it'll cut your threads. But that's further than I'm getting into it right now. So the chuck is a really smooth one. The run out on the faceplate was on 0, so the chuck zeroed well to the shaft, and I'll show you how to unscrew that in a little while. It's a really good 3-jaw. The downfall I think of this one is to reverse these jaws. You unbolt it and flip it, and they fit back into the dovetail. My issue is the amount of space this takes up compared to a regular chuck, and I don't have the factory chuck. The factory 3-jaw is much skinnier and smaller jaws. So my downfall of going with this chuck is, yeah, it's a 6-inch 3-jaw, which is bigger than what I need right now. But if I want to grab the ID of a pipe, it has to be a pretty big pipe. So it's got its pros and cons. I had a little smaller Harbor Freight lathe. I wish I would have kept that thing because it had a way smaller chuck, a little 4-inch. I can grab little tiny stuff. Anyway, to take the chuck off, I'll probably pause the video, but I'll show you how I normally do it. Is I engage the back gear and pull it right there. So the chuck's unscrewing. And let me get off camera so I can unscrew it so I don't drop the chuck. I've dropped it before. This is actually like a 25-pound chuck right here. So it's pretty heavy. It's actually heavier. This is a 8-inch 4-jaw, and this little 6-inch is heavier. So let me pause it. So the chuck is unscrewed. This is a 1.25 inches by 8. It might have been 1.5 inches by 8. I don't have my calipers, but here I am feeding. Oh, here we go. Trusty old Craftsman tape measure. I'm gonna go ahead and call that 1.5 inches 8. So it's 8 threads per inch, 1.5 inches. The internal of this is a MT3 taper. There is actually a tapered collet holder. Craftsman used to have a mill attachment, well, they still do. I didn't buy one. I'm gonna try to build one, but there's a milling attachment that you can put an end mill in here and use the compound to mill, just basic milling, you know. It's pretty neat. So what I'm gonna do is screw on the 4-jaw chuck and show you that. See, these threads are threaded. They're bolt-on face plates. So there's plenty of chucks out there that match up to these thread patterns. There's plenty of attachments. This is the original, and this 8-inch. This is the size of the original chuck. I believe it's a 5 or it may be a 6-inch. Yeah, the original is a 6-inch chuck. But anyway, let me get that bad boy screwed on and show you how that operates. So the 4-jaw is on, and you're supposed to put a drop of oil on the shaft before you screw a chuck on, but I'm taking it off anyway. I just wanted to show you. So quick check. What I always like to do is spin stuff by hand. Make sure I didn't accidentally leave this engaged. I mean, it's just gonna slip the belt. You see it happen now, but we're not looking to do that. Not looking to trip breakers. So 4-jaw chuck slinging off the rainwater. So the benefit of a 4-jaw chuck is each one of these jaws is independent from each other. I can turn them independent. This is a 3-jaw is a self-centering. I think there's a 6-jaw self-centering. As far as I know, all 4 jaws are independent jaws. And the reason is so you can grab stuff that's square, you know, triangle shaped. It doesn't have to be a round or a hexagon shape for it to be centered. You use the jaws to center the piece up however you need to center it. And centering up a piece takes a little while, so I'm not going to get into all that. But essentially, you put your part in, you know, inside the chuck. Let's see. Let me get one piece in there. I'm sure most of you watching this are not total noobs. So I know it's gotta go that way. See, I'm moving the jaw and it moves the piece over. So you're gonna use the jaws to move it in the direction you need to move it to center it. And you're gonna put a dial indicator on it to actually find your center. You're not gonna guess, but it's off center. And the belt slipped a second because this is a heavy chuck. So essentially, I'd put a dial indicator, find out how much is off, and push it the direction it needs to push the center. Right now, this one, if I back this one up, I know it has to go this way. And I know it's gotta go that way, but we're not. Anyway, you get the idea of how this thing works. So I'll break this down and wrap up, maybe do some final thoughts on this machine, what it can and what it can't do. But you also have to realize what you can and cannot expect from a machine like this. Okay, so you're wondering, can this thing cut steel? It's a wheel, I'm a fine steel. This is some pretty hard brass, bronze type material, and I didn't bother centering it up. Even though it's a 3-jaw, self-centering 1 to 2 3/1000ths is acceptable off center for a 3-jaw. So if I keep playing with it, loosen and tighten and loosen tight, I can get this thing straight. But for what I'm doing, it doesn't matter. So let me use the auto feed here. We're gonna run it. Kind of straighten it out. And you go back, you're gonna cut until you work. So I don't recommend going back on a final cut. You can use the gauges here if you want. So let's bring it to 10, and we're just gonna cut about 8/1000ths off total on the OD. Should anyways, but a lot of slack in the machine. You can see it did really good on bronze. And this is the old bushing from a Go Devil long tail frame. I just use it for experimenting. So let me find a piece of steel. So this is some galvanized steel. Nothing too terrible. So see, I back cut it. So it left a spiral groove. Let me find something harder. So this is a knurling tool. Change it out my quick change tool posts. Let me get oil on me, but I love these things. So essentially we're gonna run the knurling tool in. Turn sideways. Walk it down. Apply a little more pressure, not much. Cut a little deeper. And then take it off. Turn it off. And I always love the knurling tool. Let me get my rag here. That's how you make grips on stuff. I mean, I gotta clean it, but it's old school technology. It used to be back in the day when you had a bushing or something that was worn out and it fit just a little too loose, they would knurl it, and all these little grooves would expand a little and it would tap back on and fit snug. It's not really a great fix, but back in the day when these things were, you know, the top of the line stuff, that was a good idea. Anyway, and when you do the milling attachment, you can disengage the belt drive, but there's a pin you push and it lines up with all these little holes in the gear, and it locks the chuck so that as you're milling, your chuck is locked. And I'm guessing there's a formula to count the teeth, whatever, get it lined up where you want it. I'm not sure, but key points on this thing: pre-1940 you have Babbitt style bearings. If you let them wear out, I mean, look, this thing's 80 years old, it still has adjustments. So 100-year plus on the bearings if they're maintained. This bearing here is not taking oil well, so I need to pull this one apart, clean it out, all that. It's an old machine, so underneath here is like a set screw that locks this pulley to the shaft. See how it's loose right now? I just tightened this 10 minutes ago. What needs to happen, I need to pull it apart, clean it out, Loctite it, double set screw, do what I gotta do. But a lot of stuff vibrates loose. If you don't shim these gears correctly, you're supposed to put a piece of paper in between them, shim them and all that, and I gotta pull all these nuts off. That's why when I'm not auto feeding, I just disengage it so it's less wear in the gears. not so much for the noise, but these are bushings in here that need to be oiled. So all this has to be pulled apart and oiled and reset. So, you know, back when this thing was made, I mean, they made what they made. You know, I'm sure bearings that tiny may not have existed, or maybe they felt it wasn't required, it wasn't needed, you know. So the Timken bearing version of this lathe, this nut is adjustable. You pull this flathead screw, which you don't see anymore, it's set screws these days, and you adjust this and it pushes the cone bearing, like boat trailer bearings, the old wheel bearings, and you adjust the tension of the bearings till you get the 1/1000 or 1.5, whatever you want your readout to be. So essentially what I do with the Babbitt bearing is I chuck up a piece of metal in here and I pull up and down on that with the dial indicator is going to be reading, giving me my up and down reading, and that's how I know I need to take a shim or add a shim, whatever. If you take out too many shims, if I go lower than 1.5 thousandths, the caps get a little warm after about a half hour running. So what I'm doing, the extra friction is not, it's not worth wearing out my machine. Also, I have the tailstock. It's loose right now, it's adjustable, but it comes out. I got a live center, drill chucks. I mean, whatever you want is available. Is the MT2 taper. This is available at Harbor Freight, or I mean any online machinist place. This is the old lantern style tool post. This is the holders that it uses. I wasn't a fan of them, but it fits these little bits. It works, but what I found with the lantern tool post on there, you put the lantern in the slot, and see how I'm using no more, sitting in the box. This goes on top and it's curved, so this tool fits through the slot, but underneath the slot, if I have it in this box, is like a half moon key. And that half moon key, in theory, adjusts on this cone to change the pitch and angle of this tool. But being this angle is already angled up, it's like you have to shim it plus that to get the tool low enough to get the correct cutting angle. Now, it's possible back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, whatever, they had different tooling bits that corrected the angle, but what I have, this thing was a pain in the butt to use. So I just made the call, $150 for this from China. I'll tell you what, it's great. I'm not complaining. I'm not running a machine shop. I'm not doing major things, so it doesn't, if it is off a little bit, it's fine. The chuck cost me $236 shipped. The motor from Harbor Freight with coupons was like $154, and the belt at Napa, man, that might have been 15 bucks. Overall, I'm more than happy with the machine for the little projects I'm gonna do. It's gonna get it done. So that's it. If you got any questions, let me know. I'll try my best to answer them, or if you want to correct me, if you know for a fact what year these things are, there's a model number. As far as I can tell, this model is pre-40s, mid 30s to pre-40s. So thanks for stopping by.